The Steelers smartened up and kicked Kenny Pickett and Matt Canada to the curb for Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and Arthur Smith. For the first time in a while, there's true excitement surrounding the Steelers offense. We dig into Pittsburgh's 2024 fantasy outlook on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
Yeah, I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We are finally on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to put a disclaimer out there. This is my favorite team, right? We're going through every team. Each of them get their own episode with a little asterisk now because we have skipped over the Denver Broncos, but it's because they do not have enough fantasy relevant players. So when we hit on the Patriots, we're going to do the Patriots and the Broncos together, right? Two teams that do not have enough people for a full episode. But we're moving on to the AFC North now, starting with my Steelers. They overproduced in terms of the win column last year with what they had, right? But offense is still terrible. 28th in points per game, 27th in fantasy points per game. Luckily, happily, they fire Matt Canada. They're moving on to Arthur Smith this year. They trade away Kenny Pickett this offseason. They sign Russell Wilson for cheap. They trade for Justin Fields. They trade away Deontay Johnson. They draft Roman Wilson, the wide receiver out of Michigan in the third round, and then spend some early draft picks on offensive linemen. So lots have changed this offseason, and I am one happy fan. I'll say that. But for Vinny, I want you to tell me right off the bat here, how much of an impact does Arthur Smith himself make to the Steelers offense?
Well, a few things that are going to change here. Arthur Smith, when he goes back to Tennessee and Atlanta, he's used a lot of 12 personnel. So we'll see Pat Freiermuth on the field a lot more with regularity as a blocker and receiver. So that's the number one thing that we know for Arthur Smith's offenses. Number one, we know they're pretty run heavy. So that's going to help Najee Harris. They've upgraded their offensive line, invested again in a rookie there in the first round. So they are looking to run the ball. And Mike Tomlin, we know that's his favorite identity, playing defense, running the ball behind it. So this should be a run heavier team. This is going to be a throwback team. If you go back to Russell Wilson on the Seahawks when Marshawn Lynch was the power back and he was kind of making some big plays, throwing downfield, but they weren't looking for high volume for Russell Wilson. It took him a couple years to become really fantasy relevant. So if you want to take it back there, take it back to the history of the Falcons and Titans with Arthur Smith. That's the kind of offense you're going to have, very run-friendly. It's going to help the quarterback run at times as well. That's why they got Justin Fields behind Russell Wilson and then throwing the ball deep. And that's why they have George Pickens, but no longer Deontay Johnson. So that's a pretty easy way, I guess, to sum it up. But that's what we're looking for the Steelers.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Listen, like Arthur Smith, we understand how he uses his star players, and maybe it wasn't great in Atlanta, right? But with how bad the Steelers have had it with play callers lately, like I am excited to see there being more space. I think that's the biggest issue with this offense over the last couple of years. Like they average the second fewest yards after catch per reception since over the last 2 years. But I'm not putting that on the players because they also had the lowest expected average yards per after catch per reception too over those last 2 years because all they did was throw to the sidelines. Like that's all they would do. And also like tight window throws. They were second in the NFL over the last 2 years in tight window throws. And then also they led the league in boundary receptions, which is within 2 yards of the sideline over the last 2 years. That's not going to happen with Arthur Smith. He's going to be much more creative, make more space, also use play action. The Steelers never use play action, second lowest in the league last year in play action rate. Well, the Falcons used it a ton. Their 2 seasons under Arthur Smith as head coach. And then also in 2020, when he was the OC of the Titans led the league in play action. Now, that gets me into Russell Wilson, who's a very, very good quarterback when he gets to use play action, like one of the best in the league. But he's being forgotten about in fantasy, right? Which I'm shocked by because last year he finishes as the quarterback 15 in points per game. And that's with the Broncos. And that's with the Broncos benching him because they didn't like his performance, right? Still finished as a quarterback 15, scored more points per game than Jared Goff last year, and only 0.4 fewer points per game than Patrick Mahomes. He goes to a better team now. He's just being kind of discarded at quarterback 28 cost. Do you think his cost is just way too low, and should he be drafted higher this year, Vinny?
Yeah, I think he's way too low. I mean, he's a guy that wasn't all that terrible as we made it out to be in Denver. He was pretty decent when he had some help, and there was not a lot of help. The offensive line, even though they had a good run blocking grade, they were kind of underachieving in pass protection. The weapons were all over the board, right? There's not a lot of continuity or consistency from that group. And the Steelers are not like the most established receiving corps either, right? I mean, you got to figure out what the roles are going to be for these other guys behind George Pickens. It's going to be maybe a lot of Freiermuth on the field there as well. So it's not the best receiving corps that we can go to work with, especially if they're going to be a high run percentage of an offense. But again, Wilson, he probably is a throwback to those days where he had around 25 touchdown passes, maybe running for like 500 yards. Now, it's not terrible to put all that together, and I think he's going to finish higher than out of the QB2s, where that's where he's ranked right now. This is no way this is going to happen. I mean, it's a competent offense. He's going to add some stats on the ground. As you said, he's going to make some big plays. The play action and those shots are going to be there. The protection's a little bit better, and I think the running game is going to be better. So all those things add up to Wilson being better than he was in Denver. If that's the case, then you're going to get a pretty good value in Superflex and 2 QB leagues, and you're going to have a pretty decent backup because we know for the most part, minus that 1 year, Wilson is very durable as a quarterback. So you can count on him. I don't think you're going to see Justin Fields on the field unless something happens to Wilson. I think they want to go through this 1 year, see what they have in Wilson, evaluate the situation again, and go from there.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see Fields unless Russell Wilson gets hurt, or unless he's just like his 2021 version.
Yeah.
Like if he was, or sorry, his 2022 version. If he's like that, then maybe he gets benched. If he's like what he was last year, he's not getting benched with the Steelers. Like they're going to be winning games. Like Tomlin knows how to win games. The defense is going to be good enough to get them winning games. So he's not going to be benched unless he has a disastrous season or else or he gets injured, right? So I know we're all like, I would love to see Justin Fields too, right? Like I wish he got another chance. I hope he gets another chance in the future. I just don't think it's this year. But yeah, I think Russell Wilson's going to have a really solid year. He even had 341 rushing yards last year. Again, he played 15 games, missed 2 games, 7th among quarterbacks. So he's still running. I think he's still going to, I see 350, 400 rushing yards, very realistic for him this year. When you're looking to see who he's going around, he's going right in between. Listen, these are the 3 quarterbacks going ahead of Russell Wilson: Derek Carr, Bryce Young, and Daniel Jones. I would much rather Russell Wilson than all 3 of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, actually, Bryce Young sounds like the second most appealing guy in that group at this point because of the improved weapons, where I think it's more status quo with the other guys. And really, Derek Carr's not going to be running. Wilson's going to give you that. I mean, Bryce Young might give you a little bit. Daniel Jones might have more appeal in the Derek Carr in this case. So, yeah, I think we just want to throw it away based on his end of Seattle career and then what happened in Denver. But he can play. And keep in mind, like, he has a future Hall of Fame resume when you look at it. His first 10 seasons, all winning seasons, all very efficient. So keep that in mind. And he's looking for that next level and maybe that rejuvenation here to win with the Steelers. And I think they're going to have to put up better offensive numbers if they want to win big. I think they can still make the playoffs with their defense and their running game, but Wilson is going to be the factor in how far they go and how great they are. And can they win this division? Those are all going to depend on Russell Wilson's play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson are going to make a huge difference to George Pickens, to Najee Harris, maybe even to Jaylen Warren. We're going to hit on those 3 guys' fantasy outlook for this upcoming season in our next segment. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Comparison is the thief of joy, and it's easy to envy others people's lives. What do you do when you get caught up wishing your life looked like someone else's? Therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have so you can start living your best life. I have personally benefited from online therapy greatly over the past few years. It's helped me learn, positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. And it truly does just empower me to be the best version of myself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you don't have to stress because you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. My boy George Pickens, also your boy. You love George Pickens too. He's not upping draft boards the way I thought he was going to be. Once the news of Russell Wilson's in town and Kenny Pickett's gone, I thought he was going to start shooting up draft boards, and then especially once Deontay Johnson gets traded, right? But he's sitting there at wide receiver 28. He's holding strong at that cost. He's not really moving up at all. He finishes a wide receiver 26 last year, right? He was a wide receiver 33 in points per game, so a little bit more inconsistent. And yes, he did when you go through his weekly finishes. I mean, he had a week finishing as a wide receiver 102. And then he also had a week finishing as the wide receiver 2 on the week, right? Like it was a roller coaster of a season. But also, they threw no touchdowns last year. The Steelers have 25 total passing touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. Russell Wilson had more than that just last year in 15 games played. It's been brutal, right? So I fully expect George Pickens to be the top target here. Get close, upwards of that 130, 135 targets. We know how efficient he is with them, with the yards per reception. I expect him to be the main receiving target in the red zone and the goal line. Like, I expect him to have a really nice season.
Yeah, and I think Russ Wilson, even you look at the years in Seattle where they were very run heavy early in his career, I mean, you can expect 23 to 25 touchdown passes. Michelle said that's 2 seasons put together, and that's going to give you more opportunity to score. Now, I just think he's been undervalued. I think the whole Steelers team has been undervalued for fantasy. Maybe it's how last year went. Maybe it's how we feel about Arthur Smith and Wilson and even Fields from last year. So, but I look at Pickens. Why? I mean, you have Deontay Johnson gone. He's clearly the number one. And keep in mind, they had a bit of a personality thing, and he never really settled with Kenny Pickett, even though we hyped Pickett to Pickens. So when we look at this, I think Wilson to Pickens can be a lot better. You look at the guys he's going around. Amari Cooper, I would maybe take him ahead because he's also in a similar situation in the division where he's clear number one on his team. Zay Flowers, that's a closer one. I think I would still lean Pickens there because, again, he's still a main man where there's Flowers, there's Mark Andrews and some other guys. Keenan Allen getting older in a crowded situation. And T. Higgins, that's an interesting one. I think that's pretty close. But when I look at this, I think Pickens and Higgins are very underrated based on where they're kind of put here. So I think Pickens is a solid wide receiver 2 choice. I just don't see it going down from where he was last season.
Yeah, so especially I feel like we're just throwing away the Deontay Johnson thing getting traded. That is huge. He got to play 5 games without technically 4 full games without Deontay Johnson, and then Deontay played a little amount of snaps in week 7 when he first came back from the injury. But from those 5 games right there, he averaged 14.2 fantasy points per game and half PPR. That already puts him as a top 10 wide receiver from the numbers last year. That would have been more than what DJ Moore scored last season. Yeah. And then also he had 4 games last season with at least 8 targets, which I do expect him to be around that volume this year on a per game basis. And that's where he really exploded. Averaged 18.5 points per game in those 4 games. That would have put him as the quarterback 3 in points per game this year. But listen to these numbers when he just gets 8 targets. 130 yards and a touchdown, 127 yards and a touchdown, 131 yards, 107 yards. All this guy needs is opportunity. And you know who's going to give him opportunity? Russell Wilson, because he throws it up to these type of players. Yeah, Pickens isn't the best route runner of all time. It doesn't matter because Russell Wilson leads the league in passing touchdowns, air yards per attempt on tight windows since 2018. This is his type of dude. He's going to trust him to come down with a catch, and we know that Pickens is really good at that. So I expect I think he can be a top 12 wide receiver this year. It's just what's his floor, right? I guess like what's the risk of taking him? There is a risk. So you brought up like T. Higgins is close to him, but when you're comparing him to like a Pickens or Amari Cooper, a Cooper feels a little bit safer, but don't you think
Yeah.
Pickens is such a higher ceiling? So would you go for the ceiling or the safetiness?
Okay, I'm going to give you a wide range of outcomes for where he could go. Fantasy buzz term, by the way. Looking at it, we know Jermaine Kearse was the go-to guy with big plays, and then you have the ceiling for Russell Wilson in that role, DK Metcalf. So somewhere in between, but maybe leaning towards the Metcalf area here. I think what's going to happen is, remember we hyped up Pickens with Pickett? That let down. Russell Wilson and Cortland Sutton let down. Now, these are the two guys that are going to fix it together. So that's what you're going to see. I mean, those combinations and potentials just totally fell apart. I think you'll see both of these guys capitalize on that. So I'm excited about their connection this year, and they're going to help each other finish much higher than their ADP and ranking.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Moving on to the running backs here, because we have Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. They're going very close to each other in ADP. So Najee Harris's ADP right now is running back 20, while Jaylen Warren is at running back 26. Warren's going about a round and a half to 2 rounds after Najee, right? So people think it's going to be pretty close scoring, which it was last year. Warren was a running back 33 in points per game, while Najee Harris was a running back 29 in points per game. It was not what you wanted from Najee Harris last year. It was a big disappointment. He definitely started to come along at the end of the year, had some nice weeks there, but to start the first half of the year was brutal. He gets so many touches, and now he gets Arthur Smith, who, the Falcons averaged the second most carries per game. They had the third most rushing yards per game over the last 2 seasons under Arthur Smith. And like their offense stunk. So you would expect them to run a ton here and probably have both guys, both Warren and Najee, on the field at the same time very, very often.
Yeah, I mean, you also look at the situation we had last year in Atlanta. Is it going to go this way with Arthur Smith, Bijan Robinson, with the little Tyler Algier, where kind of the roles were kind of reversed, where I think Robinson's more the Warren-like back, and you'd say Algier's more like the Harris-like back. We know Harris is more of a co-lead with Warren here than that situation where it was Robinson and then Algier. So that's something you're going to look at. But then you dig deeper, again, parallel Titans, right? It was Derrick Henry in the power running, and that's what Arthur Smith kind of feasted on. That was the main guy, and there was not a lot there. And in receiving situations, you would see just a bunch of guys in that spot. Now, Warren, we know, is a very good receiver, but Harris is also a decent receiver. So I think this bumps up the value of both of the guys. And again, if you're in standard leagues, Warren has less appeal. If you're in full point PPR, I think he has a lot of appeal. So I think it's not going to be just straight down the line. Like, here's the power back, here's the receiving back. I think there's going to be more usage and more crossover from both in each role. So I think this is really helpful because, again, this team should run quite a bit. There's room for both these guys to produce. If they're putting up 23 touchdowns in the air, there's probably room for double-digit touchdowns on the ground, and that's going to help both of these guys as well. And I like how they've upgraded the offensive line. They keep working at it. So I think the running is going to come, and you open up the field with those deep throws. A lot of that is going to happen for the running lanes here. So I'm excited for both of them. I would bump both of them up here, but don't just assume, okay, this is the guy early downs, Harris, and we're going to bring in Warren. I think they're going to be more interchangeable than that.
Yeah, I think they're both going to be on the field a lot. I mean, Atlanta, you had 2 running backs on the field last year, 30% of the plays, while Pittsburgh did that 1.7% of the plays in 2023. Like, we never got to see them together last year. I think we're going to see a lot of that. Maybe that's going to annoy us when it comes to their fantasy because it's going to be hard to figure out. I will say with Warren, he makes me a little bit more nervous because of his fumbling issues. Yeah. And if he keeps fumbling, they're going to stop letting him on the field. And that dude, like every time he touched the ball, I started sweating. He fumbled 4 times last year, tied with second most among running backs. And it's not like he was carrying the ball 300 times, right? Like he didn't have that many carries and kept fumbling the ball. However, he was second on the team in receptions with 61. And there's really nothing to say that can't happen again. I mean, it's literally Pickens. And we'll see who the second target is. We don't know. So when you're looking at Najee here, Would you rather take Najee at RB20, 68th overall, or wait for Warren and take Warren at 85th overall?
I might be okay finding a way to target both, to be honest with you. Like, I'm okay. I like both of those values. I think Warren would be a little bit better, but I think there's going to be a little bit more separation with Harris's scoring and Warren this year. I just think Harris, if they're going to put the ball, let's say, inside the 5, I think he's the guy that's going to touch the ball. And I think that's where the separation comes. So I'd say that Warren is a good value, but so is Harris. So I would want to target both these guys. One is gone. I'm not going to be, okay, I'll let someone else get Warren. I'm going to think about Warren if Harris is off the board.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting to see where Warren's going because I actually like the running backs around Warren more than I do Harris. Like Harris seems like an easy pick over Alvin Kamara, Ramondre Stevenson,
Yeah.
and Aaron Jones. Maybe Stevenson's close, but his offense is just so bad. And then with Warren, behind him is Jonathan Brooks and Raheem Mostert. Like deciding between Raheem Mostert and Jaylen Warren would be very, very hard. Do you have one way that you would lean?
That's a tough one for me, but I think I'm going to lean towards younger. In that case, Mostert. Get his knee hold up again at age 32. I doubt it. So I want to go with the younger back option for sure on an upside offense here that's going to be improved from last year for sure.
Yeah, we have 2 more guys to talk about in our final segment here that, again, either of them could realistically be the second target on this team. And if that's the case, they're going to have some fantasy relevance. So we have to try to figure out who that might be and if we, desire to draft them this year in fantasy.
All right. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. And I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But the playoffs have been over here for NHL and NBA. We've crowned the Boston Celtics and Florida Panthers, waiting for the NFL. But baseball's still going on. You got some interesting international soccer tournaments as well with Euro and Copa, I should say. And the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So get in on that action while we wait for the NFL to return. All right, Michelle, it is time to close the show. And this is another guy I'm excited about. I think I'm just, again, in on a lot of the Steelers options, and I like the value so far. So Pat Freiermuth, he has been inconsistent. Part of it is his usage. He doesn't always stay on the field, but as we mentioned, the 12 personnel should keep 2 tight ends out there quite a bit, and the limitations of wide receiver. He's going as tight end 15, 128th overall. So I really think it's a big opportunity for him. I know Russell Wilson's history is not throwing to the tight end and creating a lot of production there, but keep in mind, this team has a big drop-off after Pickens. They need someone to catch targets. And again, if you're going to say Pickens is going to score some of the long touchdowns, I think Pat Freiermuth might be scoring some of the shorter touchdowns, but I like the fact that he's going to be on the field helping that running game more times than not.
Listen, yeah, it's weird because it's so different between Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith. We know Arthur Smith loves his tight ends. Now, it doesn't mean a star tight end that he loves, right? It could be Jonnu Smith or Kyle Pitts, but so we don't know if it's going to be Pat Freiermuth that he loves here or not. But there's really no other options, right? Like Darnell Washington, we'll see, but he's more of a blocking tight end. Freiermuth should have a solid season, but I worry now because we have 3 seasons of data here with him. Tight end 27 in points per game last year, tight end 13 in 2022, tight end 15 in 2021 rookie season. I don't know what his ceiling is. I would put him probably at like tight end 8, which in terms of tight ends is not anything very exciting. I think he's going to need at least 8 touchdowns to make you feel somewhat good. And even then, I don't know like how happy you're going to be with it because I don't know how much the receiving yards will be there. But I think you're going to be higher on Freiermuth than I am this year. But he is going super late. He's going as a tight end 15. So I don't hate taking a shot on him. It's just I'm not going to feel comfortable if I come out of the draft and he's the tight end I have to start in week 1.
Yeah, the only way I would say that, Michelle, with an exception, is if I can get TJ Hawkinson. If I have Pat Freiermuth as a backup, strong backup, I could start him early. Then I get Hawkinson healthy, and I'm rolling here at tight end. So, it would be a fine backup for me. Especially in a tight end premium league, I think Pat Freiermuth is a great value here. So, yeah, we get his production, but he's had noodle-armed Ben Roethlisberger. And then they went to Mitchell Trubisky and Kenny Pickett, and they went to Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. So maybe this will be finally a strong arm quarterback that can get the ball to him and consistent and can kind of work with him to have good chemistry. So again, there's a big drop off after Pickens without Deontay Johnson finding the targets here. So that's another reason I like Freiermuth. And again, he's that inline blocker type the way that Jonnu Smith is. So I think Arthur Smith is going to love his style of play and kind of reward him for that in high leverage situations.
Yeah, he definitely could be the second target, right? And he could surprise. We both expect this team to be very run heavy, right? And then the shots they do take, I expect George Pickens to get a ton of those shots. So it's hard to, get excited about another pass catcher in this offense, but I love the third round rookie they drafted, Roman Wilson. It's exactly the guy I wanted the Steelers to draft. He's smaller, right? He has like a Deontay Johnson build, and he's a great route runner like Deontay Johnson, but hopefully he can actually, not do the dropsies that Johnson had. But we saw in Michigan last year, he was a touchdown machine, weirdly enough, even though he was, not the biggest guy, but caught 12 of JJ McCarthy's 22 passing touchdowns last year, over 50% of his touchdowns, and also 37 of Wilson's 48 receptions last year either went for a first down or a touchdown. Like, he is a playmaker. I really like Roman Wilson. It's just like in full PPR, he might have some value in like deeper leagues, but I don't know. I don't know if he could be like a top 36 wide receiver this year.
Yeah, we're going to keep an eye on him. He's a guy that definitely is going to be a waiver priority. If we watch in deeper leagues, you could take a shot on him. But yeah, we're going to watch him because, again, the targets are gone with Deontay Johnson. I'm not sure if Calvin Austin can hold out really to be more than a gadget type player here in this offense. And yeah, they're going to have to find targets. You think Warren and Harris get some of them behind Pickens and Freiermuth, but there's also going to be plenty to pick up from Wilson. And our best case scenario, I mentioned Metcalf and Pickens. Best case scenario, this becomes a new Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, this combination for Russell Wilson. It may not happen though this year, so just have to be patient. But Roman Wilson, the talent, is there to be fantasy relevant sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I really like him in Dynasty. I don't expect a whole lot out of him this year. Like, he can get a decent amount of receptions and be important. I just don't think his yards per reception will be enough. And then also, like, besides Tyler Lockett, but Lockett is such a deep threat, right? Like, we don't normally see these possession wide receivers like a Roman Wilson have success with Russell Wilson. He had a Jerry Jeudy last year, and we don't know if Jerry Jeudy just stinks or he doesn't have the connection with Russell Wilson and Drew Lock. But yeah, I'm going to keep my eye open on Roman Wilson, but he's not going to be on my draft radar this year, but he is for Dynasty. That is it for today's show. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Everydayers, Vinnie and I will be back tomorrow talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. And man, there's a lot of stars on that team. So do not miss it. It will be a fun episode. Bye, y'all.